200 something.
211.
211 years ago. Yeah. I was born in a Mandam village that's way far away in the east. And my mother was an Indian. Her name was Sacagawea. My father was a French trapper, and his name was Toussaint Charbonneau, and they named me Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau. So before I was born, there was a bunch of people from the government, and it was the Lewis and Clark expedition. And they came all the way up the Missouri River to the village that I was going to be born at. They came before I was born. And my mother was hired to be an interpreter for them, and my father a guide for them as they went all the way across looking for a passage to the west coast. So they were looking for a water passage that they could go from St. Louis all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Do you think they found one?
Yeah.
Stop it. Find it. How come they didn't find it? Any idea? What?
They sailed in their own direction.
Well, they went overland. And where's my map? There's my map, right?
Did you see Lewis and Clark?
Where's my map? My map. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Maybe I left it.
Did you see Lewis and Clark?
Yeah.
So Ramsey, if you have something to say, raise your hand.
No, I left it. So we went from St. Louis in the middle of the country. Do we have a map?
Do you need
We have
a
a map
United
in the
States
class?
map?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, we have that. Oh, you can't see it, I guess. Oh.
Smart glasses, aren't they incredible?
That's a lot of things.
Oh. Did they talk about that Indian girl who helped them?
Yeah, that was my mom. What was her name?
Sacagawea.
Yeah, but it's named Sacagawea. Everybody says Sacagawea, but the real pronunciation from the Indian word is Sacagawea.
Wait, your mom's Sacagawea.
Sacagawea. Sacagawea. I was on her back the whole time. I was. She carried me.
It's a bull. But
Okay.
how come you're not 200 years old?
What's that?
How come you're not 211 years old?
If I was 211 years old, I wouldn't be here. So I'm a reenactor. So I reenact Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau. So you can see me as a real person rather than being Bones. 200 years old. You wouldn't want to see Bones. Bones can't talk.
And they don't. But unless you got a recording thing, it's like the recorder. Like a recorder.
That's okay.
Oh, you're
So they came to the winter. They came. Lewis and Clark came to the Indian village in the wintertime, and it was a cold winter. And my mom was pregnant with me. And guess what? On February 11th, 1805, I was born. And so here I'm a little tiny baby, and oh, good. So I'm here.
Wait a minute.
And the Lewis and Clark expedition came all the way up to here in South Dakota, and that's where I was born, right there. And the Lewis and Clark expedition needed to go all the way to the Pacific Ocean. So, as it was cold in the wintertime, once everything thawed, my mother put me on her back on a cradle, and I was a papoose, and she started taking me up the river all the way towards the Pacific Ocean. She would have had a hat like this on me. This is the hat that would have kept me warm. And so that's a little tiny hat for a baby, and this is made of beaver. So can you pass this around as I'm talking? Just pass it around to all, okay? Can we do that? That's my beaver hat. So my mom took me on her back all the way across with the Lewis and Clark expedition. And so my mom was an interpreter for Indians. And so as we came up to Wyoming, where the mountains were, this is the Wind River Mountains, then guess what? My mom actually was not from the Mandan village, but then my mom was Shoshone. She was captured by the Mandans and brought to the Mandan village, but she was really a Shoshone. And so when she got up to the Wind River Mountains where the Shoshone lived, then she was able to talk with the Shoshone and give horses, because we were on canoes going up the rivers until the Wind River Mountains, to the Rocky Mountains. And that's where the river stopped. How come the river stopped from here to here? Why did the river stop at the mountains?
Dam?
Because it couldn't go uphill. So the mountains came up like this and back down the other way. So the rivers stopped there. So we rode horses over the top of the Wind River Mountains, the Rocky Mountains, until we hit the river. And where did we go? Then we found the river and went all the way to where? Where were we looking? Pacific Ocean. So my mom carried me the whole way. And that was the Lewis and Clark expedition. The core of discovery was the group of men that went all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And so they discovered all of this land. For who? Who were they trying to discover for? England? No, it wasn't England. England wanted it.
St. Louis?
St. Louis is where I came from.
China?
China? No, for the United States, because it wasn't the United States then. Britain, England had it. Spain wanted it. Russia wanted it. But the United States sent the Corps of Discovery so that they could discover how they could get there from the United States, because the United States wasn't all of this yet. So that was the beginning of my life. My life was the beginning of going all the way there and back on my mother's back in canoes in land that nobody had ever been. And so we wore buckskins. Why do you think we wore this leather stuff? Why didn't we wear pants? Why didn't we wear dresses like Alyssa has, or a jacket? Why did we wear buckskins? Why did we wear leather?
Because it wasn't made yet.
It wasn't made. What wasn't made? The cloth. It's right. So that's what we wore. We wore skins because there was no material back then. There was no cotton for jeans. There was no silk or anything. We had to wear what the Indians wore, which was the buckskins. So we came all the way back on the Lewis and Clark expedition to St. Louis. And on the way, they dropped my mother and I and my father at the Mandan village again. But guess what? Clark from Lewis and Clark liked me so much, he nicknamed me. He nicknamed me Pump. Because I love to dance around. And he said to my mom and dad, you know what? If you'll bring him to St. Louis, Pumpy, I will educate him. I will treat him as my own. And so here I am, half Indian, half French Canadian, with my mom and dad not having much of an education, and here Clark says, I'm going to educate you.
So Alyssa's great mother, like great grandmother, is Sacagawea.
I'm a reenactor, so that's my great great grandmother. I don't think it's Alyssa or I's really genealogy, so I'm the reenactor to share that with you.
Like
But
we're doing our biographies, you know.
Well, how old were you when she got
how old? That's a good question. I got brought to Clark when I was about 4 years old in St. Louis. And guess what? Then my mom left because she didn't like being in civilization, and she went back to that Mandan village, and my mom passed away when she was about 4 years old. So, no mom. Dad was a trapper. He was off in the mountains, and I got to live with Clark. Now, I got a great education. I got to be around the city, and then when I was a kid, I wore a hat like this. So, that was my hat as I was a kid. So running around St. Louis, that's the hat I got to wear. So that's my hat in St. Louis as I was a little boy. And so I went to school just like you guys went to school, and got learn to spell and write, and for a half Indian, half French Canadian trapper, that was absolutely huge.
How did Cart die?
What's that?
How did Cart die?
He died long after. So after I was educated and I became a teenager, then I went back to live with my dad, and I learned to be a trapper. And so as a trapper, then guess what? I would wear a hat like this, because it would be cold in the winter.
He's wearing
Okay? So like there you go. So this is the kind of hat that I would wear in the wintertime to keep me nice and warm. What do you think that is? Can anybody recognize? Fox, that's exactly right. So it could be fox, it could be raccoon, it could be possum, it could be made of lots of different things. But this this is the hat that kept me warm. Okay? So I learned to be a trapper. So what does trappers trap? Trappers trap animals. So what kind of what kind of animals did they trap? All kinds. So this is a bunch of furs that I would have trapped. And you know what? The one that was the most prized fur out of all these was the beaver. Why do you think the beaver was such a prized animal to trap? No, it's because we made hats out of it. And so I have this hat that was, and I'm not going to pass this around, but this hat was made actually in the 1800s, and this is the top hat that was made out of a beaver. That's a beaver top hat. That's made out of this skin right here. And we would stretch it like this on a willow and let it cure and dry. And so the trappers would send this back to New York and to Europe so that they could make this, a beaver hat.
So what did they get?
What's that?
What did the Indians get?
What did the Indians get?
What did money?
Well, they got money for this. So this was what they did for a living, right? And so they would take these beaver hides and they would stretch them like this, let them dry, and then they would bundle them up into 100-pound bales, and they would take them back to the East Coast, to where population was, so they could make hats. So that was the beavers for beaver hats. So after I learned how to do this, an interesting guy came, and he was a duke from Germany, and he hired my dad to take him exploring. When he was done exploring, he brought me back to Europe. And so here I am, a mountain man, young, and got to go to Europe. And so I got to stay in the castles of Germany. I traveled to Africa with him. I went all over the world. And it took me about 6 years, and I thought, I'm done with this. Where did I want to go? Where do you think I wanted to go after I was in Europe? Home. I wanted to go home to the mountains. And so when I came home at about 24 years old, where did I go? Back to the mountains to trap. And so trapping, then guess what happened? These hats, they went out of style. Nobody wanted them anymore. So what happened to the fur trade? What happened to trapping beavers? What do you think happened? We didn't do it anymore because they didn't want those beaver hides anymore, because they didn't want to make hats. So what did we do? If beavers weren't popular and the skins that we did weren't all that popular, because now we're starting to get cloth and stuff, so we don't need the skins to make the buckskins. So then I became a hunter, and I hunted buffalo. So here's a big buffalo hide. So what do you think I hunted buffalo for?
To sell food.
To sell food? Well, we did use the food, that's for sure.
Blankets.
We did. We made buffalo robes, and we used it for leather. So we made saddles out of the leather, harnesses out of the leather, all kinds of things made out of leather.
You use the meat in it for food.
They used the meat for food. Do you know what the prize meat of a buffalo was?
Bull.
It's tongue.